Ever wish a podcast would explain how to get better faster from the standpoint of longevity, biohacking, and personalized functional medicine? Co-hosts Dr. Jason Bradley and James Chester, along with executive producer Rachel Bradley, bring you the Get Better Faster podcast. Their mission is radically simple: to revolutionize health by connecting people with the experts, technologies, and protocols that mainstream medicine ignores. Because people deserve to get better faster.
Hello, Get Better Faster Nation. I'm Dr. Jason Bradley, and along with my co-host, the one, the only, James Chester, and our incredible executive producer, Rachel Bradley, we want to welcome you to another exciting episode of the Get Better Faster podcast. Today, we are joined by a man who is on a mission to change the way we think about food and inflammation. James White is the CEO and owner of KBMO Diagnostics, the company behind the only patented food sensitivity test on the market, the food inflammation test, or FIT test. With over 20 years of global experience in diagnostics and pharmaceuticals, James has built KBMO from the ground up into the powerhouse serving over 15,000 providers worldwide that it is today. His company doesn't just test for food sensitivities. They measure actual inflammation, which is a game changer for anyone dealing with autoimmune issues, gut problems, brain fog, weight loss resistance, and so much more. If you've been struggling with confusing symptoms and unrelenting inflammation, you don't want to miss this show. Without further ado, James, my friend, welcome.
What a pleasure to be on here and with both of you kind of legends of this area. So again, excited to see how we can knock out the next hour or so. Excited.
Love it.
Yeah, James, it's been a good time getting to know you over the brief couple minutes we've been behind the scenes in the green room. I said we had to cut out the tomfoolery, so let's get down to business. Food sensitivity, testing, it seems to be your wheelhouse now. 20 years in the diagnostics and pharmaceutical industry. How did you realize that this pathway was going to be your mission? And then when did you know that this was the thing that was going to get people better faster?
So I think for me, we started off doing some stuff in molecular diagnostics, which was all kind of very exciting and, kind of the next world, but obviously now this world. And we looked at some cardiovascular type stuff. And it kind of really got to me that, when we spoke to the cardiology type industry, they're all like going, at the end of the day, all these cardiologists are going to basically tell you to eat less and exercise more, which is maybe a bit of an aggressive way of, condensing 8 years of training. But it felt like, that's really where they were getting to. And it wasn't really individualizing anything. And so that kind of stuck in my craw a bit to say, well, how are we not kind of in this day and age coming up with something that's individualized per patient? And so what I want to do is how do we come up with something that helps in that area? Again, there's a lot of genetic stuff out there and, people are working on exercise, but food is really one of those areas that although there's a huge industry around it, no one had looked at it from an inflammatory standpoint to say, okay, let's look at this on a very simplistic basis of, if our body's a system, what are the inputs? What are the outputs? The inputs are what we're eating, simply put, and our outputs are generally the symptoms that we're all wandering around with. And so the idea was, how do we come up with a way of looking at that in a more detailed way? And so that was really the thing that kind of came to me. And I was approached by a small company that was headed up by a guy called Dr. Brent Dorval, and he was a brilliant scientist. But like most brilliant scientists, was like, why would I want to wander the world and go and sit in lots of exhibition halls, talk to lots of people about what I'm doing? And so that's where I came in. So again, my view is I'm kind of like a translator of a brilliant man in terms of Dr. Dorval into something now, which is, I think, a lot more simplistic, easier to understand. And that's in essence what we've done. We've said, how do we take something which is, for the longest time, the fact that we even still talk about a food pyramid, you could argue it's about as useful as a pyramid. But the reality is what we're trying to do is individualize food so that when you consume something, is it causing you inflammation? And if it is, I'm going to take that out of my diet, course correct, and eat something that's not going to cause me inflammation, given inflammation is the root cause of all disease states. So that's really what made me think, we can get people better faster by saying individualize that care. They all understand what foods are. So when they understand it, they're likely to be able to, be compliant to it. And the concept for us was, how do we make, and we touched on a great, I won't tell you everyone quite the context of how Sachin Patel came up, but Sachin Patel talks about, the doctor of the future is the patient. And so, we wanted to look at everything we do from the perspective, how do we simplify it so that as we get people involved, then they can understand those test results, keep them short, keep them simple, so that it's actually actionable information that they're getting. And so, again, that's been our whole shtick and approach, to say, simplify it. And that's what we're trying to do.
Go ahead, James.
Well, I'm going to pass it to Dr. Jason here in a brief second, but anytime we talk about pyramids, those are ancient. And when you kind of correlate like pyramids of the Aztecs and the Incans and Egypt, we can put the food pyramid of the US right next to those, because contextually it's ancient, and it's ancient ideas, and it's upside down, and they're still exploring like the origins of most of those pyramids. And we need to go back and explore the origins of that food pyramid also, because I believe we missed the mark with that. And we're still investigating the reality around the actual food pyramid that we've been hook, line, and sinkered for the past 60 or 70 years, or however long it's been out in the market. And you're saying something else about the origin of you and how you got into this. I really think you became the guy that used the 2 ears in one mouth, rather than the way they used to say it, you have 2 ears and one mouth. Why don't you use the 2 ears more than the one mouth? And that's what you did. You became the spokesman for a guy that was a genius, that had a system, and you helped him implement the strategy by figuring out how to get the brand more attention and more widespread. And you went from like 5 practitioners to 15,000 globally. Yeah. So I think that's nail on the head. And I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Jason.
Thank you. Yeah. And it's been really interesting. I just want to clarify something for our listeners in the green room about Dr. Sachin Patel. Here's the deal. Sachin's a good friend of ours, and we were very blessed to have him on the show on a previous episode. He's brilliant, and I hope everybody's following him. What came up was I was commenting about how there's corn dust or something going on, because I'm living here in the Midwest for my last winter ever. I've been saying that for a decade now, and I think it's tickling.
I don't believe him.
No one's buying that.
Yeah, but it's been tickling my nose hairs, and I said I got to do one of those wax things where I wax my nose and pull out the nose hairs. And the last time I said that, Dr. Sachin said, you shouldn't do that. Those nose hairs are there for a reason. I'm like, yeah, but they tickle. But anyway, that's how that came up. Just let everybody know it was really deep science stuff we were talking about, waxing nose hairs.
Splitting the atom in the green room. There we go.
Yeah, that's what we do. That's what we do before the show. Also, I'm just going to out myself here, because James Chester, you have the opportunity to call James White James, and me Dr. Jason, or Jason or whatever. But when I refer to James, it's going to get confusing. So I'm going to try to hopefully use last names too, just to keep it straight. But James White, speaking of exhibition halls, that's how you and I met. I don't even know how many years ago it was. And I was thinking about this. It was either at some IFM conference, or an A4M, so Institute of Functional Medicine annual conference, or a A4M, which is the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, the A4M, or maybe the Great Lakes Conference, Functional Medicine Conference up in the Twin Cities. But it's been really exciting to see your company grow and watch you helping serve so many people, clear up confusion around symptoms, not only for thousands and thousands of patients, but the reality is thousands and thousands of providers as well, and giving some clarity on that. That's been really awesome, just to watch that evolution with you, and to know you for all of those years. I just like watching people and businesses grow, especially when they're adding value to the world. I love that. The other thing, before I get to my question, as far as food pyramids go, I did want to clear up some confusion. We don't really talk a lot about this, but in America, and for our international audience, and even for our American audience, because they might not know this, our food pyramid, which is all based on grain, not inverted. I'm not really sure about the inversion as far as that goes, but there's still some problems with it. And as James Chester mentioned, certainly it's a little ancient and a little outdated, and it's certainly not personalized, which I think is really cool. And I'm going to get into the fit test here in a minute. But I think it's really cool what KBMO can do with personalizing diet, which I think is super exciting. I'm going to get there in a second. But the other thing I wanted to mention is our food pyramid here in the United States was created by originally the United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA. And this is the thing that I want people to understand. They are not a medical or health agency. Their entire job, my friends, is to do what? Do you guys know? James and James? J squared? To sell American agriculture, right?
Yeah.
And what do we grow in America primarily? It's grains. You're right. It is corn and it's wheat and it's soybeans. And so it was very heavy in what can we sell, not just to the US, but to worldwide. You know, we're the breadbasket of the world. You know, I think we compete with the Ukraine and Russia for that. But you know, the point that I'm making is they created that food pyramid not with health in mind, but to sell agricultural products. It had nothing to do with health. It was never based on health. And so the thing is, I like that we're trying to get there with, you know, RFK Jr. and Maha and all of this. And we're trying to move in the right direction and not be so grain heavy and start to lean more on real foods. You know, I think that's brilliant. But again, that food pyramid was never intended to be medical advice. It was meant to sell American agriculture. And I don't think a lot of people know that. It was never rooted in health. I do have a question, but James Chester, I saw your hand go up.
You know, as you're talking about this, you asked, you know, what is the Food and Drug Administration? Why did it do what it did? And I've always said to people, why the heck are food and drug in the same group? And well, I think that anybody out there that's curious about why we have a culture that's so chronically ill and sick and inflamed, they might want to just go and look at who's in charge of that organization and start looking at who the people are, and then go do a deep dive on the people that are at the heads of those groups and wonder why the food and drugs are in cahoots with each other in the same organization. And when you really consider the outliers of that, you're going to say, whoa, why did I just like take this for what it is for my entire life and never question it? And that's what this show is doing. It's really opening the eyes of the consumer, but also the practitioner to know that there has to be a better way in and a better way out. So what we're doing on today's interview with with James White is talking to him about the inside out approach to finding why people are getting clogged up and inflamed, whether it's the dairy, the wheat, or the soy, or the pharmaceutical products that are being put into the livestock that we're all consuming, and how to basically move ourselves away from this sick, fat, and nearly dead approach to happy, healthy, and thriving. And like what Dr. Jason does, the functional medicine part of this with Radiant Life and Radiant Solutions, and what he's doing with the thyroid. I think when we start to unclog the human, we start to then give the future back to the people and really start disseminating a better lexicon for people to understand what healthy people look like and how they thrive in this new world that we're all living in today. Dr. Jason, back to you.
Yeah, man. Thank you. And I appreciate that sidebar, because it's so important. I think the hardest part of our show, James and James, to me, is the context, because the three of us have deep insider context. And for our listeners, there's some people that do, but a lot of people are just fed up with the system and they're listening to our show to get real solutions to get better faster. And I think that there's just a lot of education to do around with it. James White, I'm going to pass this over to you in 1 second. I want to follow up with Food and Drug Administration. And this will tie right back into KBMO. I'll plant a seed now that James White will know what seed I'm planting. If we just think about a company that used to be called Monsanto that got bought up by Bayer Pharmaceuticals, right? Because Monsanto was hemorrhaging around glyphosate, right? Glyphosate is a petrochemical pesticide, or whatever you want to call it, that we use in America freely. We spray it on our crops, our grain crops, that we also feed to our animals, but we spray it on the grain crops at the end of production. Well, during the whole production.
We eat it. We eat it, Jason.
Yeah. And it increases yield. Yeah, it increases yield. And it dries out the, whatever. But the point is, Monsanto lost all, quote, credibility in my head and all their money because they lost the largest lawsuits from an individual against a company ever in the world. The very first one that they lost was over $1 billion to someone that worked in the fields with glyphosate. He developed lymphoma. Unfortunately, he didn't make it. His family got the $1 billion, but I mean, he didn't make it. And I would think that would have been enough for us to end putting glyphosate on our food, but it doesn't. Bayer buys it, and they're still involved with the drugs, the drug company. They're still involved with the drug part of it to help us, heal what they caused by, and I'm kidding, they're not healing us, but having a quote unquote solution for the problems that they're causing in the food industry. So it is the food and drug industry because they're all the same companies. The people that are poisoning us with our foods are selling us their snake oil, in my opinion, of a solution with the problems that they could have just prevented by having better foods on the onset. James, I see that. I know.
Let me go a step further because there's a couple of really key points there. We measure glyphosate. So we have a test now for glyphosate, which again is depressing beyond belief that we have to measure that to demonstrate for everyone, look how much glyphosate's in your system. It's a great test though, but we do offer that. And the other thing is, Bayer Pharmaceuticals were the people that developed the red dye that is kind of, originally after World War II was invented to color plastics. And here we are. Wow, what progress we've all made back to that pyramid. It's now in the food chain. So the reality is, Bayer have got a history of food, plastic, colorings, dyes. And one of the other things we've added on the test is colorings and additives, because again, it's almost impossible to, avoid them. They're in processed foods, increasingly in supplementation, not in the good supplements that we work with, I'm sure, but they're around, and then personal hygiene products. So there's all these different things, and we talk about consumption, but all of these things are coming in from different elements. Everyone's got their fingers up, so I'm going to.
We do. It's a hot topic. I just want to say, and then James Chester, Bayer Pharmaceuticals also was involved with the chlorine gas in the Holocaust. In the concentration camps. These are the people that are running our drugs and food industry, and for some reason, we, at least as the unsuspecting public, we have no clue. I can't imagine a situation where I would step back and be like, they did make that chlorine gas and they did kill all those people in the Holocaust, but I bet they're doing good. Oh, and they made glyphosate that causes lymphomas that people die from and lose billions of dollars in their lawsuits, but they're probably doing good work otherwise. I don't even understand how that company exists to this day. How are they not shut down? James Chester, go ahead.
I go down to Mexico City quite frequently, and I go north to this little area called Toluca, and there's a Bayer pharmaceutical huge factory, and there's a little city on the way between Toluca and Mexico City called Lerma. And if you guys really want to get to the brass tacks of it, go get some water samples and some soil samples of the Rio de Lerma, which is the river of Lerma, and it smells like dead people. Like when you drive through for a total of 40 miles, probably pretty much the same distance where I grew up in Davenport, Iowa, to where Jason lives near the Iowa City area, the entire swath of land between that much time of driving, about 45 minutes of travel time, it smells like death. So if you guys really want to get down to the brass tacks, not what we're eating, not what we're testing, not what they're going to call glyphosate in the next 3 years, they're going to probably tie it up and strip it down and call it 6 other things to where you can't know what it is anymore, because they're going to change the same way they do with high fructose corn syrup, the same way they do with soy products. They find out that people are starting to target in on those things, and what they'll do is they'll fractionalize it and they'll come up with 17 other things that they label it as, and then they still put it in your food when they tell you that they're not putting red 44 dye in your food anymore. They're going to fractionalize that too, and they're going to call it 17 other things, and it's still going to turn up in the diet process of people. So we just have to be really keen and really clever about how we start to identify who the bad guys are and how we can get them to really clean up the soil, really clean up the river, really clean up the water. And by proxy, that cleans up the testing. And when you're testing people and we start doing this cleanup project, there's a guy named Chad Begracki, and he was a river conservationist back in Iowa. And what he did is he started funding to clean up the Mississippi River. But the thing is they were focused only on pulling the things out that were heavy, like old barge pieces and trash and rubbish and couches and things. What they didn't realize is that the biggest thing that they needed to clean up was the animal runoff from the farms and the things that they spray on the crops, which polluted the river, which polluted the fish, which polluted the people.
Yeah.
So I think when we're talking about this, it's a back to physical science class back in your mid grades, back when you were in junior high school, physical science. You have to look at the nitrogen cycle. And if you look at
Yeah.
the nitrogen cycle and the way things conceptually evolve, and that's the reason why on the cover of, I have a picture of it here right now. And I know I'm going a bit long-winded on this, but if you go look at the cover of Time magazine, and the headline for Time magazine right now is "Our Cancer Mystery: Why it's now striking us so young."
It's not a mystery.
And if you think about it, I know I'm taking up a lot of bandwidth here with my output, but when you think about where we're at right now, the questions that we have for you today, James White, are about how to get people better faster. But
Yes.
if we're in this toxic soup where nobody is complicit, nobody's compliant, nobody's actually saying, "Hey, actually we did wrong," and that Rio Lerma, we need to clean that up because those people down there are important, and we're actually killing them off. And we need to make sure that they're getting clean drinking water and they're not bathing in this water and they're not making their food with this water. So we really need to go back to the baseline of consumption, to where when you're doing tests, we're not getting these lymphomas that Jason's talking about with, younger populations getting sick. So I think there's a lot that goes into this. And I'll just tell everybody, I'm not a doctor, I'm a journalist, I'm a marketer. But when I start to tackle big things like this, and I knew that James White was coming on today, and we were going to talk about all things food and all things dietary, but also all things testing and how we can make improvements. So I'm going to set the mic down for a second, and I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Jason because he looks like he's like chomping at the bit.
I'm chomping, and I'm going to pass this over to James White with my question.
All right.
But I was going to go into the fit test. I'm going to put a pin in that and come back to it because I know that's your flagship. It's really your flagship test. But let's come back to it. Because we're talking about glyphosate right now. I just want to say personally, they just did some studies. Iowa has the most nitrate levels in nitrate levels in the nation. We have the worst water. We're also the highest in cancer rates, right? There's no mystery. I mean, I don't know why Time Magazine is asking that question. There's a direct correlation. Also, you can look at the people that live next to golf courses, not just in Iowa, but worldwide. People live next to golf courses that they're spraying all that crap on. I'm using a different 4-letter word for that. It'll probably come out later with an SH word, but they're spraying this crap on it. And then those people get Parkinson's and cancer. And I mean, everybody's like, why is that happening? I'm like, why do you think it's happening? It's the pesticides, petrochemicals, weed killers, all of that stuff they're spraying on there. But this James, get ready for the pass. It's going to be on the glyphosate exposure test. So I'll prep you. Our older daughter, who's now 25 and currently in Brazil, traveling around, doing some work down there, and also, learning a lot about, Latin American culture at the same time. Adeline did a capstone project in high school, all the way back in high school. Smart kid. And she did some research where she was actually looking at glyphosate levels with a very small population. It wasn't like hundreds of thousands of people. It was like, I don't know, dozen people or a couple dozen people or something like that. 100% of the people that she tested. Now, granted, they were local, but 100% of the people that she tested had dangerous levels of glyphosate in their system. And again, our own water supply right here, our tap water. This wasn't, so you were talking about checking the river, James Chester. I'm talking the tap water, the end product that people are drinking that's supposedly purified and all this crap. It's full of glyphosate leftover crap that's toxic to the system. That's what we're drinking in Iowa. Anyway, she was doing her research, not just looking at the levels, but also she was looking at what I'm going to call a novel phytochemical or a plant chemical to reduce the glyphosate levels. So this kid at like 17, 18 years old was doing research in this area that was shocking. And yet at the same time, and I mean this out of love, and our daughters, both of our daughters are very, 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 very smart people. They're very smart people. But if a 17 and 18-year-old can see this and they can test it and they can figure it out, why the heck can't our powers that be see this and take action on it? All of that said, James White, tell us about that glyphosate exposure test. Tell us about what it is, what it's testing, what you're seeing on a mass level, because you have a lot more data points than a dozen or 24 people. Tell us.
No, absolutely. And I think one of the interesting things was, I think, as Dr. Jason knows from his functional medicine practice, there's a whole load of patients, unfortunately, get bounced around because as yet, I haven't seen it, and we all have we all saw all the kind of advertising on TV, but there's not yet a drug for not feeling great. And so the problem is all these patients who are wandering around not feeling great, and finally, if they're lucky, they get to see Dr. Jason or other, great, talented functional medicine practitioners out there. We decided let's give them a test for glyphosate, so at least we can demonstrate to them, look, this is one of the areas. It's rarely is it just one thing, but here's a part of trying to come up with these group of triage type tests to say, look, on the food sensitivity, let's look at, what are your inputs? What's causing some of that stuff? We clearly recognize glyphosate is one of the issues amongst, that the whole food chain and, what's going on with it. So we wanted to come up with a test that was uniquely different and got the right level of sensitivity to say, look, it's a simple urine test, send it into the lab. And again, it's in Kansas City, Missouri, right in the heartland, and say, how do we test people to come up with at least some more solutions? Because as I say, the problem is if you break your leg, it's great to go into a hospital. If you don't feel great, unfortunately, you're going to see 8 or 9 different specialists. None of them are going to get to that root cause of what's going on. And so the concept was, we came up with glyphosate, we came up with an organic acid, another great test to try to see what lies beneath, along with the food sensitivity. And so that's been our approach. How do we come up with some of these baseline tests to work out what's going on in terms of different elements within your body versus just assuming, well, it's just your gut or it's just your liver. The reality with all these things, it's more nuanced, it's more complicated. It's root cause medicine. It's what Dr. Jason does on a daily basis.
Well, I hear what you're saying there. Let's identify it. How do we fix it?
Well, I think part of the problem is if we can identify which patients have these things, you can then treat them. And so one of the things that we've tried to do more of is traditionally, I feel like we'll go back to all these kind of exhibit halls we stand in, but we've tried to work out is there's a ton of physicians who want to do the right thing. And so my view is physicians and practitioners in general want to do the right thing. Unfortunately, they'll go to a lot of these medical conferences and they're getting hit at a black belt level. My view is what we're trying to do is take it to a white belt, make sure it's simplified enough that patients and providers can understand this stuff and start joining some of these modalities together, James. So the idea is there's no point testing if you can't tell them, okay, great, with these test results, what are you going to do next? And so that's why we've partnered with some of the great supplement companies out there, Nutridyne in particular, Biotic, some of these other great, all family-owned companies. And again, there's probably a clue in there somewhere as well, that do it the right way. Say, how do we keep this simple? We don't worry about profit all the time. We say, how do we fix people and how do we work as an ecosystem, as Dr. Jason talked about that before? How do we get all these good people together to give, I think at IFM, which is the Institute of Functional Medicine, 40% of the attendees are first-time attendees at each meeting. Mm-hmm. So the reality is there is a desire and a want from practitioners to help their patients. And it's our job to kind of combine these things together to say a test on its own is worthless, a supplement on its own is worthless. How do we get good providers and give them some protocols and ways of treating things in a combined way versus everyone shouting from the rafters on an individualized basis?
Mm-hmm. I get what you're saying there. Now we've identified the problem. We identify the solution. Now we're taking this. You said that most of these companies you work with that are doing the supplements are family owned and family run. Now let's talk about the family unit. Now you're doing a test with somebody and you find that there's a lot of adulterated things that they can't be eaten. I'm just talking like hood talk. Like they can't be eating that stuff. You can't be eating that stuff. And then we're going to talk about feeding the whole family now. How do you modify the dietary restrictions of one of them to then say, hey, we're going to make this a model for the whole family now? And how do you start identifying Because if there's a family of just say 4 people, how do you start identifying a healthy program that we start reducing this to where we're not cooking 4 different things for 4 different people every time? Like, how do you actually implement this information and make it practical?
So there's a couple of points here. So firstly, we normally get mum comes in first because whatever reason, mum always wants to take care of herself. Dad feels like unless he dies on the job, he's not doing a good job. So the idea is, the reality is, women are much smarter. They always will. I'm not sure we ever catch up. So they basically take the lead. They start feeling 100% better than the rest of the family unit that you just described. So the rest of the family unit kind of get dragged along, go, wow, that's how you can feel? And so what happens is they then start working together. And again, another great provider, Dr. Christy Hughes, she's out there and she's got great case studies of families that have come together and worked together. And, we provide meal plans. And then if they're working with a good provider, they can start adjusting the foods to make sure that, there's something for everyone. And because they're all feeling better, that, it's a really common goal that, look, we all want to live longer, but we want to live better and stronger and fitter and all these other good things. And so by combining all these things as a family unit, it's a great scenario. But again, it takes generally one person in the family to do it. And then it's remarkable. The providers that will come to me and say, James, we had one family member do it. Before we knew it, they've got everyone else doing it and everyone else is feeling much better. It's the same with friends and family. We put the test results on their phones. They all kind of wander around. And again, one of the nice things here, James, and I think one of the things that medicine has been really poor at is that this test, there's no judgment attached to it. So I'm not going to castigate you because you're sensitive to eggs. God damn it, you're sensitive to eggs. No. You might do because the doctors say, oh, your triglycerides are through the roof. You're a horrible human being. What have you been doing? This is something that the information is easy and it's something we all understand. We all know what an egg is. We know that if it's red 4+, we're going to take it out of our diet because that's what Dr. Jason told me to do. So I think it's simple information and baby steps, which people are seeing good clinical and positive outcomes on versus going, trust me, in 18 months' time, you'll feel different.
I know Dr. Jason has something to come, but I do have to ask you, how frequently do you get people back in to retest them? Like say that you start to get the improvements going, mom brings it into the household. We start to see some positive impacts. When do you go back and try to sample with mom? And then
so it's interesting with the foods. What we generally do is we don't recommend come back in because you're making good progress. What we do is because we test for leaky gut at the same time. Mm-hmm. And again, back to Hippocrates, if all disease begins in the gut, let's demonstrate to mum that actually we're healing her gut. So she's not only feeling better, but there's a core part of her body is actually now healed because we measure 4 or 5 markers around that. So James, my approach is let's not complicate it by going, let's see if we can kind of come up with a few more complicated things or different things to look at. We want to kind of maintain that momentum and now say, let's make sure we can measure the gut as one. And generally that's how we've approached it. Because again, the idea is let's try and narrow these things down rather than trying to open it up.
Yeah, Jason, jump back in, otherwise I'll talk all day.
Yeah, man, I know this is yes, I agree. I know that we have 90 minutes scheduled, but I can already say, James White, we're going to have you on for part 2 and probably part 4 at some point. It's what we'll do. So I have some questions around the fit test still, and then of course there's the gut barrier panel. There's so much to dive into here, but I do want to just say, for full disclosure, I love both Biotics and Nutridyne. I love the companies. They're family owned. I know the families. They're good people. I will say that we're recording right now in February. This show will drop at the end of May. In between the recording and the drop date, I'm actually speaking at the Great Prairie Conference in the Midwest here for Nutridyne. I'm being sponsored by them, and I'll be speaking about my real niche that I'm brilliant at, which is thyroid authority, hypothyroidism, thyroid autoimmunity, and giving practitioners the ability to have protocols to follow they can implement Monday mornings to change people's lives with the thyroid, because those people get tossed around too. All of that said, Christy Hughes, also very good friend of mine, near and dear friend of mine, one of my mentors in functional medicine. She has Docera Vita. I'm not sure I'm saying it right, but I think it's Docera Vita. Yeah. And she's brilliant. She'll be on the show later this year. She's brilliant. I love her. we've known each other forever. So I just wanted to kind of comment over that. It's interesting to me too, just that the names that we've all brought up, the Sachin Patels, the Christy Hughes, all these, it's like, we don't all know that we all know each other, but it's it's actually a very small world of people talking about what we're talking about in the way that we're talking about it. And I think it's so brilliant that James Chester put together this show, Get Better Faster. And I'm so privileged to be on here with you guys. That said, I want to go back to the fit test because James hit something about families, and I was going to ask about retesting. But when you do, there's a couple of things that I'll just kind of throw out at once because they're kind of the same question. Do you find across populations common findings? As an example, I'm making this up. I doubt this is what it is, but like, don't eat kohlrabi because it's going to cause inflammation in like 9 out of 10 people. I'm teasing. We know that's probably not true. I'm trying to use something absurd. But do you find some common findings across populations, number one? And then a subset of that is, do you find common findings in familial? Is some of this, depending on the word you want to use, heritable or inheritable? I'm just curious, as the medical director here. Tell me your thoughts on it.
I mean, what has been interesting, and we're very fortunate. We have labs now in Mexico City, Chile, Brazil, China, Japan, and the UK, and our base office here in Boston. And we've been fortunate. We've run studies in different parts of the world. On average, we've seen an 80% improvement in a Chinese population, a Japanese population. The Japanese, you'd say, like, that's a healthy eating country. They can't have any of the issues that we have. Wrong. So again, it's one of those things that we've seen by eliminating the foods, and we see the frequencies are incredibly similar around the world. Because again, people are, the staples are the same: dairy, eggs, some of these things. They're all very similar. So we've been fortunate to look at these and say, how are these things working? So we've had the great privilege of testing people around the world. And in terms of family, we've not generally seen, because again, that would have been an easy answer for James's question, which was a good one, which is said, like, well, it's good because mom always tests for milk, dad always wheat, and we're good to go. We don't have to worry about it. And all the kids kind of follow on the same line. It can be varied, and it can be a bit more nuanced than that. And so that's the beautiful thing. So for example, I was eggs and wheat. My wife happened to be salmon and tomatoes. Now tomatoes. We test everything here in terms of organically. And so that has been helpful. And again, because we're a small company, we've been at it for 15 years. We care passionately about everything. I can tell you who caught the mackerel. I can tell you where the wheat was grown in Maine. So we know in minute detail where everything comes from, because we care about it, we're passionate about it. And if I'm in a conference halls and I get the good fortune to speak to Dr. Jason about what he wants to bring into his into his clinic, I want to know that I've got that level of detail and give you the confidence when you're going to talk to your patient. Not a finance-led lab that, in 3 years' time, they're trying to flip it on. So, they won't do the hard work that we do. So, for example, we spent 5 years developing a zonulin assay. Zonulin is part of our gut barrier panel, and it basically tells you how well your tight junctions are opening and closing. And so really effective to work out, do you have leaky gut or not? And so we partnered with Alessio Fasano, the godfather of zonulin. And so again, but it took 4 or 5 years to do that. If you're, trying to just flip a company on and you don't have that passion and love of the science, you won't take that time. You'll work on kind of ROIs and boring crap like that. Our view is we want to do the best of the best. We want to make sure the science we have is world class. And so Alessio Fasano is a great example of that. Dr. Dorval, who invented our test, he invented the first rapid HIV diagnostic. So again, we come at this with a deep level of scientific knowledge, and my job is simplistic. It's how do we simplify that to make sure these very busy and brilliant providers can understand it and see how they can then implement that into their practice. Sorry, Jason, you had your hand up. My apologies.
No, you're good. That's awesome. And I think I will just speak, knowing you and knowing KBMO, your science team is like, they're top tier. I mean, it's not like fly by night people. And I just want to say, as a practitioner, in the trenches, there are so many fly by night companies, like you said, that are just created only to market. I mean, they're great marketers. I mean, they're started with, millions of dollars in advertising budget so that they could explode their company to a $50 million, $100 million company and then spin it off in 1, 2, 3 years without really having the data sets and the longevity to really actually give actionable, practical advice to the providers, to the clients, to the patients that they're serving. I just want to say that. And so I wanted to give you some credit for that. I also wanted to go back, and then I'm going to ask you a different question. You said there's not a drug, as far as you knew, for feeling great, a little bit ago, a few minutes ago. And I just want to say,
you're someone who's not feeling great. How about that?
Right. I just want to say,
I'm sure, again, maybe not on air, everyone can come up with some drugs which makes them feel great, but like, I'm just going to take it simple.
Listen, I'm just going to say, if I have a tincture of cocaine and a tincture of opium or a combination thereof, I can help anybody feel any way they want, any time of day or night. Right. And if we look at like those drugs that help us feel great, they are really tinctures of cocaine and opium. I mean, it sounds crazy to say, but I mean, come on. They're uppers, they're downers. I mean, it is what it is. James, go ahead.
No, it's like I said about glyphosate. What they do is they give it a new name and they fractionalize it and move on with it.
Yeah.
So I am curious.
Prednisones. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we can talk about.
Opium, morphine. It's like it goes on. I mean, it's like,
yeah. We just give them drug names. We just call it something different.
I am curious to know something because I'm sure our audience or practitioners are thinking this. When you think about food sensitivity and you think about allergies, are they the same or are they different?
There we go.
Great question. They're different. And so an allergy is an instant reaction. So generally, both of you, if you had an allergy, you would know about it very, very quickly. So think kiddo eats peanut, instant reaction, and generally a very bad one in terms of, with a food sensitivity, it's the delayed nature. So it's delayed up to 72 hours. So again, it makes it much harder for the patient to work out what they might have consumed in that time scale, which is leading to the symptoms they're presenting with when they come in to see Dr. Jason. So our advice is that we tell the patient, don't change anything. We're trying to test you for what you're currently consuming is leading you to the symptoms you're presenting with when you come in and see Dr. Jason or another good, provider. So the idea is, you ate yourself into again, we talk about inputs and outputs. The inputs led to the outputs that are causing you to come in to see Dr. Jason. Let's not change those artificially and say, oh no, it's like how many units of alcohol do you drink a week? Let's not lie on the inputs. Let's stay on the inputs that you're having, because that's leading to the outputs, and that's what we're trying to test. But what we're trying to test is not what you're exposed to, not everything that you're consuming in that 72 hours, but of the foods you're consuming, which ones lead to an inflammatory response. And that's the big kind of corollary and difference versus some of the other tests out there.
I want to jump in. I want to nuance this a little bit too. When we're talking about, eating peanuts, strawberries, whatever it is, and they, we both kind of hugged our throats here because anaphylaxis, closing of there could be some life-threatening issues there, and people need EpiPens and that kind of stuff. Yeah. Those are from, I'm going to do a little science here, everybody. Those are type E immunoglobulins, or IgEs. I help people remember that they're the big elephants in the room. You can't ignore it. They're huge, right? The thing with the thing with other types of testing, we're not going to get into the other parts of it. With this delayed testing, they're usually not anaphylaxis, right? It could be fatigue. It could be headaches. It could be GI upset. It could be, aches and pains, through the joints and the muscles. There's a number of symptoms that could be associated with these 72-hour delays. And it's difficult, and especially if you're used to eating the same foods over and over and over again. I don't know how I should know this, but maybe James White, this. Most Americans don't eat very many foods. Our list is, like 15, 20 foods deep, and that's about all that we eat there. Even though there's hundreds of foods, we tend to eat a couple dozen foods all the time. So if you're used to eating that all the time, there's not really I'll use kohlrabi again. I don't know why, but I tried kohlrabi the other day and then I got a migraine. It usually doesn't work like that. It's usually these ongoing, persistent, insidious symptoms, that are very difficult to sort out. And in the old days, what I used to do before this testing was available, I would put people on what we called a modified elimination diet, or an MED. For my modified diet, it was white rice, lamb, and pears, because I was guessing, but most people weren't responsive to that in a negative way. And then if their symptoms got better, we would start building from there. What I love about the KBMO FIT test, which again is the food inflammation test for our listeners, is it's looking at, literally it's asking the question, what foods are causing inflammation. And for our listeners too, just for clarity, I think that the powers that be, the doctors, the providers that are out there, we've done a really good job talking about inflammation and pain. Pain is due to inflammation. Pain, they're all related. What we've not done a good job with, in my opinion, is that inflammation is part of the normal immunological response to something that the body doesn't like. So again, inflammation is not just pain. Inflammation is a sign of an immunological reaction. And I think that, when we start talking about immunoglobulins, like those type Bs, those elephants that I was talking about, we're talking about an immunological reaction to a food. So James White, here we go. FIT test. How is the food inflammation test different from, we talked about IgEs, right? I mean, it's not anaphylaxis. Well, I guess, first of all, what are you testing? And then I have some comments. Here's my follow-up question. I won't hold the carrot. There's this, I won't name the name of the company. There's some companies out there. Let me start all over. The food inflammation test is a blood test. Okay. There are some companies out there that are testing hair, like literally hair samples for food sensitivities. I don't really understand it. Having been in the practice for 26 years, deep in the trenches, when people come in as a new client, they're like, well, I got my hair tested and they said this and that about my diet. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know anything but blood with this. I don't want you to throw anybody under the bus unless you want to. You're welcome to. But I would love to know, what exactly is KBMO testing with the FIT test? How is it different than everything else that's out there? Because it's a patented test. It's the only patented test for food sensitivities. Everything else that's out there is a facsimile of what you're doing. How is it different? How is it patented? What makes it unique? And what's going on with these hair tests?
Yeah. So simply put, we're measuring basically the whole immune system. So again, you mentioned the elephant in the room, great way of describing the IgEs. We measure the IgG. So there's all the other tests out there traditionally have just measured what I would describe as exposure, i.e. they're going to come back with telling you everything you're consuming, which is a massive so what. And so that was why, they always got a bad reputation. And so to your point about some of these companies that come in and, spend a lot of money on marketing, they think, oh, this is an easy one to do. We're going to put money into a cheap IgG test.
Yeah.
And they're only going to give the patient half the answer, because when you tell everyone what they're all consuming, that's not optional. We all have to eat something. I mean, whatever it is, we still have to eat food. So the idea of listing out everything they're consuming is deeply unhelpful, as well as, there's no way a patient's going to be compliant. So by then adding a thing called the innate immune system, so the other half of the immune system that's a true marker of inflammatory response, we can get at the root cause. So we can basically say, look, really important to know what you're consuming, but let's try and then break that down to a way more important element that says, of those, which ones are causing inflammation. And generally, we'll only see 5 to 10 foods per patient. And why that's important is that's massive from a compliance standpoint. Because even a Dr. Jason, if you say, look, here's 25 foods to eliminate from your diet, it doesn't pass the red face test. There's no way Dr. Jason's going to say that and not going to call BS on himself, going, that's not right. So the reality is we are zeroing in by looking at this, both halves of your immune system. And the brilliance of that was invented by the gentleman, Dr. Brent Dorval, who invented the rapid HIV diagnostic. He came in and looked at it and said, why are we only looking half of this, not all of it? And so that was really, I think, the difference with this test, is it just took it on another level. So rather than, as James mentioned earlier, guessing, not testing, if you're going to test, let's make sure you do the right test. And the right test takes it all the way down to that endpoint and conclusion, which says, here's a handful of foods that you need to eliminate. Let's eliminate those for what I call a semester. So, a short period of time. And let's revisit at that point, see how you feel. Have your symptoms, whatever they might have been, improved in that time. And those symptoms have changed over time, where people used to traditionally just look at gut-related illnesses. Now there's a lot, it's funny, 15 years ago, we did a study. The lead symptoms were anxiety, depression, and very close links with leaky gut and leaky brain. I will honestly tell you, we did not have the courage of our convictions 15, 20 years ago to put our hand up and go, wow, leaky gut leads to leaky brain. Now everyone goes, you're an idiot, James. Everyone knows that. 20 years ago, if we'd said that, we'd have been wheeled off in straitjackets. So the idea was to say, over time, we have been approached by more and more providers who recognize the importance that, again, all disease begins in the gut, and everything leads to the gut. So the reality is it the brain? Is it the gut? All the psychiatric providers now who run the test, all the better ones looking at the cutting edge of their patients, they'll say, James, it's gut, brain leads to gut. We don't mind which end it is. The reality is we're identifying foods which are reducing inflammation, and that's having a demonstrable impact. As I said, 80+% improvement on the clinical studies that we've run, which we're really proud about.
Can I take this conversation a little bit different direction, guys?
Sure.
I know that there's a lot of people out there that are interested in having healthy families. Yes or yes? Probably nobody.
I'll give that a yes.
I'll give it a yes.
Boy,
Like, gosh, I want to have a more terrible. I think I want to have more terrible health for my family. So I'm just curious, and this is just, I know you're not like a healthy pregnancy, like that's not your job. That's not what you do. But would you say that somebody that came in and did your test could start to get their bodies prepared to have a healthier pregnancy based on what you find with the work that you do? Because I think because the past 5 to 6 years, we've seen healthy pregnancies become less and less, predictable. So is there a way that you could use your systems to help prepare the mom and the dad to have more of a, predictable health outcomes when they're going to try to have a child? Because
I'm going to answer this in a slightly different way to make sure, I don't have people jumping up and down with excitement about me. The reality, I would say, is that by running this test and identifying which foods cause inflammation, if you can bring down that inflammatory burden and make sure your body's focusing on doing what it really should be doing, and that's not fighting the inflammation that, unbeknown to most patients, they brought in on themselves because they didn't realize what they thought was a healthy diet turned out to be not that healthy, then I would say absolutely you're going to be a healthier individual by bringing down that inflammatory burden. And in your point about preparing patients, for doing things, back in the day when stem cell clinics were setting up all around the place, a ton of them were running food sensitivity tests. Why? Because they wanted to bring down that inflammatory burden to prepare the body to accept those stem cells better. What do we see with some of the good people, the more responsible groups looking at GLP-1s? Same thing. They're running the food sensitivity test because they're bringing down that inflammatory response to then make sure the body's as best prepared as it can be to then look at doing what it's doing. So that is, I will say, is the answer I'll give you, James, without saying yes or no in terms of the specific. But I would say if you can bring down that overall level of inflammation, and that's more of a question to Dr. Jason, I would anticipate then you'll see a reduction in the symptoms they were presenting with, and they'll be a much healthier individual for it.
I'm just curious because I like to look at the scope of the listener that's always, thinking about what they would like to ask, but they don't. And that gives me like the pole position on being a host of the show to say, look, I know that other people out there are thinking these things and they're wondering how they can have a healthier family, not just by testing themselves, but what happens to the next level of life when we want to grow our family unit, and how can we make sure that it's predictable, almost predictable, that we can have a healthier offspring to where in the long term, they're not burdened with the same types of things that we're dealing with right now. So just wanted to go full circle on that. And Dr. Jason, I saw your hand up, so come on in.
Yeah. Hold on 1 second. There we go. Perfect. I had to leave myself a note so I don't forget my next question. I feel like just to kind of bring our listeners in, James said this, James Chester said this to James White in the green room before the show. I prepare a dossier on everyone, and it's like 1,005 pages. We know more about James White than he probably knows about himself, and because we're investigative journalists, right? And I think we come up with a couple dozen questions. I don't even know if we've even asked more than one. This is a really off the cuff interview, and I love that about our show because we have we're prepared, but it also has its own arc, and that's why I think these shows are so interesting because we're really just diving into the genius of our guests, like James White here. I want to talk about inflammation and leaky brain, leaky gut. I mean, all of that because it's all related. And then I have a follow-up question to this because inflammation is interesting. I work primarily with women 30 to 60 years old who have strange health symptoms that don't fit into a box, that when I do my investigation, and again, we're looking at genetics and blood and hormones and gut microbiome and I don't know, I mean, everything that you could, food sensitivities and all, like everything that you could imagine, we put together for a blueprint. And James Chester, we do get these questions. I do have clients that will come to us and say, hey, I'm a little off and I want to get pregnant. And I want to make sure that I'm going to be healthy enough for my pregnancy, for the baby, for X, Y, and Z. And this has been my experience in 26 years. I'm not 100% positive. This is more anecdotal. I'm just going to share this. But when we do our work with these mystery symptoms, it's not always everybody, but often it's an autoimmunity, right? And an autoimmunity is when the immune system is what I call hypervigilant. In ways that are not really conducive to at least being symptom free. I do believe that the body's always doing what it's supposed to be doing to help, create balance in the system. But this hypervigilance, there's probably a lot built in here that I'm not going to get into about adverse childhood responses and exposures and trauma responses and a hypervigilant nervous system that leads. I mean, there's all these things, right? It's a big, big thing. But I find with these women that are preparing for healthy pregnancies, or sometimes we meet them early cycle pregnancies, or maybe they've had a baby, but they want to have another baby, and their first pregnancy was rough, and their baby wasn't totally healthy, and all these questions. I do find autoimmunity, and my goal, I don't want to say claim to fame, and I'm not a slam dunk 100% on this, but I'm pretty damn good at what I'm about to tell you guys. I help women get into remission. That's what we do, and by remission I mean we run their labs. We find out they have autoimmunities because their blood is telling us. And then we change things up. James Chester changed the environment, right? That we were talking about. We create a healthier environment for them in lots of different ways. And then over the course of time, not overnight, over the course of time, their body regulates better and their immune system calms the F down. And we don't see those antibodies that are attacking their bodies. We don't see those antibodies present anymore on laboratory testing. So when I say remission, I'm specifically talking about people going from, seropositive antibodies to seronegative. And I believe, and I've seen this too, and I think it makes sense to not necessarily have to test the foods over and over and over again, because I really don't see that they change that much over time. But what I do see is the inflammatory response change over time. And it's this down regulation in a good way, a down regulation of an overactive, hypervigilant immune system that's leading to inflammation. Those are a lot of big words. James, do you have anything to add to that before I get to my question? I do. I can tell because you took a breath and then you closed your mouth like, I'm not going to say anything. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, you guys are both geeking out on these high level ideas. I just have simple questions for both of you. Why are people so sick?
And I always say I simplify it down to it's inputs and outputs. If you don't know what the quality of those inputs coming in are, it's going to lead to the disease and the problems that we've got today. I mean, it's straightforward. And so we know the quality of food is very poor. I mean, that's, again, whether it's the SAD diet, the pyramid. I mean, there's no shining light of the food system, unfortunately, that we give to 95% of the population. So the reality is there's a small, growing, thankfully, group of people who want to eat the right way. This is part of that journey, though. How do you know what's the right way for you unless you look at it on an individualized basis?
Wait, James Chester. Thank you, James White. I agree. And to quote James Chester, I think to simplify it a lot, James, I think the reason we're so unhealthy is because people don't know. And I'm going to quote you. If people knew what we knew, they'd do what we do. And that's the biggest problem is the education. I mean, we're not training people. I mean, we have ultra processed Franken foods that are box can wrap packaged, et cetera, that we're literally selling, marketing to the American public as real food, and it's not real food. And I think that that's the biggest thing. I mean, again, not to bring RFK Jr. up, James Chester has had the opportunity to interview him on his other podcast, and everybody should check out that show. That was way pre-Maha stuff, but same messages. We're trying to unravel it, but it's so deep. I don't want to say deep state. That's not what I mean, but it's collusionary. I mean, our FDA, the people making the rules about what people can say and can't say, the FDA has a revolving door where they want something approved in the food or drug industry. They'll literally plop somebody from the pharmaceutical industry. James White, you were in pharmaceuticals. You know what I'm talking about. They'll put somebody on that board to approve the chemical or the drug or whatever it is, right? And again, those people on that board, they have a vested interest. If that drug gets approved, which it's going to get approved because we're rigging the system, that person on the board is going to make millions of dollars because they're vested in the company. And as soon as that thing is approved, or that system or that protocol is approved, it's a revolving door. They go right back, and now they're working with the pharmaceutical industry, and they're a consultant for that company. And I mean, and that's who's making the rules. And I don't think that the average, at least American, I'm American. I live in America. I know Americans. James, you have some kind of accent. I think it might be, Brazilian. I can't tell. No, I'm kidding. But
I'm from East. I have to say I'm East Boston. So there we go.
You're East Boston. There you go. I don't think the average American knows that this SAD, the SAD diet, the standard American diet, is really making them super sick. 40% of every dollar, so 40 cents on the dollar, of every dollar of the trillions of dollars spent in healthcare in the United States is spent treating the sequelae, the side effects of shitty food. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, and so James, when you ask me, why are people so sick? It's because they don't know. And that's why this show is so important. James Chester, back to you.
I like this format. Can I go after a couple more questions with both of you guys?
Yeah.
Lightning rounds. Should people eat cheese?
Maybe.
Get tested.
Yeah.
Don't guess, get tested.
I agree.
What about wheat products? I know.
Wait, hold on. I want to say with cheese too, there's cow dairy, there's sheep dairy, there's goat dairy. There's, I think we have cockroach milk coming out now. I'm teasing, but I mean, I heard about that somewhere. I'm teasing, please. But yeah, I mean, what dairy? But yeah, get tested. Don't guess.
And water sources. I know this isn't like a water purification interview, but should people filter their water?
Well, I think it's like all these things. It's like if you know the source of anything that you're consuming, be it water, be it food, then you're at a massive head start. If you're getting stuff that's, sat in a plastic bottle and it's, been on a truck at 100 degrees and then you drink it assuming that it was, glacial, whatever the marketing tells you, that's probably not a good place to start. So I think it's, if you can control as much as humanly possible, what's in your system, then you've got a great head start on people.
Amen. 2 points on that. I had the fortune of working with a client many years ago named Josh, who was a farmer here in the Midwest. He has since relocated for various reasons to Hawaii to be a farmer, which I'm like, that's a pretty smart move. Maybe I'll relocate. I think Christy Hughes is trying to relocate to Hawaii. Maybe we can, I'll congregate there. It's a little bit different weather than in Iowa. But nonetheless, Josh said, in the future, people will choose their farmers, their food sources, the way they used to choose their doctors, or the way they should be choosing their doctors, highly selective. And so what James White was saying, I mean, it's very true. We need to know our source. We need to know what it is and not accept it. So there's that point. The second thing about the plastics, I want to just, this is a whole can of worms to open up again. I feel like we're in a game where we're like, say one thing and then there's 10 things to talk about. I've owned a lot of old houses in the past, and if there's like one thing to fix, it's like 10 things to fix. And it's like those old houses, they're a labor of love for everybody. Anyway, back to this plastic thing. James White, you're right. The water, the fluids, I mean, whatever it is, sitting around in those plastic containers, under heat and who knows what. I mean, those plastic chemicals, not just plastics, but the plastic chemicals are going to leach into the fluids that you're drinking, the food that you're eating. And those plastic chemicals are what we call, and a lot of times they're xenoestrogens. I mean, one of the most popular ones is BPA, bisphenol A. There's other ones that are out there. Now we have all this BPA-free XYZ. And we just came up, like you guys were saying, we have different names for it now, right? We don't want, no, it's BPA-free, but we still have these plasticizers, these plastics that are in there. And those plastic products, those petrochemical products, they are like xenoestrogens in the body. And estrogens, xenoestrogens, or outside estrogens is what that word means. Xenoestrogens cause cancer. I mean, they do. I mean, when people are always like, I got breast cancer and I'm HR, HER2, sensitive and estrogen sensitive and all this stuff. I'm like, are you drinking water out of plastic? Are you eating food out of plastic? We have a rule at our house, James Chester, to answer your question. We have a rule at our house for water and everything. I mean, you've been to our house many times. We don't have plastics around. We don't store stuff. Like, we don't have leftovers stored in plastic. Everything is glass. Everything that we have in our house is glass or steel or iron if it's food related. Our water is purified. It's purified at our last house we had a whole house purifier, and I loved it. This new house that we're at has in-tap purification, but it's RO and filtered, and it's wonderful. And then also even on our showers, we have purification for our water. So I think it's super important. I think, to answer your question, water is super important, but James White brought up some really good points there.
Well, the one thing I just add, James, is again, how much progress really have we made? I mean, my grandfather, I remember it, he used to get a case of beer in glass bottles delivered every 2 weeks. At the end of 2 weeks, they'd come back, give him another, crate of glass bottled beer. What did they do? They didn't throw those bottles away. They washed them and they brought them back. Now, it's not water, but it's that whole point that, like,
milk too.
Yeah, milk's the same thing. So there's all these things, processes that, again, the wonderful accountants got at and have screwed everything up. I mean, the consequences of their actions are, horrific. I mean, I was in Asia. You walk along a beach in Asia, it is full of single-use plastic elements, because again, anyone who's below a certain, they don't have Costco. Probably better or worse, who knows? That's a different discussion. But the reality is they can't buy bulk. They don't have the money for it. And so what did we do? We put it all in plastic. So I think to Dr. Jason's point,
and preservatives too,
everywhere, and it's polluting the world.
Yeah.
Well, you guys did a great job group tackling that topic, and I appreciate that. But I want to get to the next topic, which I think that everybody that's curious and is out there that listens to our show would be like, damn it, would he just ask this question? And insurance. I know a lot of people think that they live high on the hog when they have an insurance policy. Does insurance cover the work that you do, James White, with the testing? And does insurance cover the work that you do, Dr. Jason, with the functional nutrition and functional diagnostics and functional medicine that you do?
Again, so there's a dirty little secret out there now, and everyone who thinks they've got insurance, there's a thing they need to look at really carefully. It's called the deductible. The question is, because they've now risen to such a level as $20,000, $30,000. So that in essence, unfortunately, most people who are kind of think they've got insurance, it's catastrophic cover, because the reality is, there's no way by coming to see a good functional medicine doctor you're going to spend $20,000. So, you've got this huge overhang before you can actually really even use your healthcare. So that's one of the issues. When we started, we took healthcare, and then we found that they were, that I suddenly started looking around and talking to my better providers. They were all taking cash. So I'm like, why am I fighting this good fight on their behalf? And they've realized that the insurance model is a broken model for them. So we moved to all cash. So we try to keep our prices. We dropped actually our prices dramatically to try and make sure that the testing was affordable for patients and providers. So again, we want to try and test the 99%, not the 1%. So we're trying to make sure that we keep our pricing as low as we can to make it affordable for everyone. And then you're not spending $1,500, $2,000 on I hate to say it, an insurance policy which isn't worth the paper it's written on.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'll just come out swinging with this because I've been on both sides of the coin too. James, J squared. I'm just gonna call you guys J squared. Actually, we're J cubed because Look at that. Like we're J cubed. I love it. I used to, I'm going to hide my face a little bit. I used to work for insurance companies. I was in network back when we had HMOs and PPOs and all this stuff. I don't even know if they exist anymore. And I won't tell the whole story because our listeners have heard this and James has heard it. But long story short, they don't give a crap. They have a bottom line. They're going to pay for what's called the standard of care, which I call the standard of scare because it's very scary. It's very low level. It is asking a question, are you going to die today or not? Number one, if so, escalate. Number two, what drug can I put you on? Or who should I refer you to for a procedure or a drug? And that's it. Everybody wants this doctor that's, in network and they're, going to be in their insurance. They can choose their doctor and this and that. Everybody wants the doctor that's going to go to bat for them and fight for them and figure it out. Everybody listening, take this to heart. They don't exist. I don't know. Listen, people are good. There are good people trying to do good work in the system. I want to say that. However, you are not going to find the solution that you need within a system that's allowed you to stay so sick for so long. Period. It's not going to happen. Every single doctor, in my opinion, that's worth 2 grains of salt does not work for insurance companies. They do not accept insurance. Anyone that is still accepting insurance, they've got one foot on both sides of the fences. And I will tell you, having worked for these insurance companies, they will bind your hands as a provider and they will tell you what you can and cannot do. And the reality is, the reason I stepped out 20 plus years ago of working for insurance companies, I mean, I made a lot of money working for insurance companies. I want to be really clear. I made, 7 figures plus. I was doing very well working for insurance companies. I couldn't do it anymore because they started telling me what I could and couldn't do. And my ethics, my morals, my integrity, I'm working for my client. I'm what some people might call a patient. I call a client. But at any rate, I'm working for my patients. I'm working for my client. I am not going to have whatever gifts God has given me to help other people. I'm not going to have some, bottom line guy telling me what I can and cannot do. They can literally, go take a flying leap. And I edited myself there as best as I could. So that's my 2 cents for insurance. I'll speak very boldly to that because I've been on both sides of the fence. I know the people that are trying to straddle the fence and have a foot on both sides. It doesn't work. The insurance companies will call you out on it eventually. It's not the standard of care. And if providers are billing services under the standard of care that are not the standard of care, that's called insurance fraud in the United States. And it's actually very illegal and it's actually a felony. So if you're seeing, this is my opinion. I've lectured on this many times. I've written on this many times. If you're seeing a provider that's above and beyond this and that, and they're billing insurance, whatever, you got to be careful. That provider is probably accidentally bringing you, our listener, into an insurance fraud scheme. And they don't even know they're doing it, but they're doing it because, again, insurance is very clear. It pays for standard of care, and that's it. Is it medically necessary? That question is answered. Is it the standard of care? Who sets the standard of care? The FDA, the AMA, etc.
James, you jump in, but I have a follow-up for this.
Yeah.
Okay, given it's Heart Health Month, I've got to have my best standard of scare kind of comment yet. So the standard of scare for cardiovascular health is the lipid profile.
Yeah.
50% of patients, the day they have their heart attack, the standard of scare, that lipid profile is normal. And they did that on a study of over 100,000 patients. So again, to your point, Dr. Jason, if you go into that arena thinking that you're gonna be fast tracked into something beautiful, wrong. I mean, so that for me is really dangerous in Heart Month that we're in now, still in February. That you need to look at some advanced testing. We do one which includes some other markers, Lp(a), ApoB, some things which would dramatically improve patient of care for 30% of Americans. Okay. And it's not covered by insurance. So ApoB, renowned around the world, 5% of the US has been tested. Lp(a), my most favorite marker, less than 1% of the US population. So again, there's some, without going into a complete tangent here, but there's some real good opportunities that we could have about improving standard of care, but not a huge increase in money.
I want to just comment and pass it back to James Chester. Yes. And I always like to go to other experts because I don't want to just be the talking head here. But if you go to like someone like Marcia Angel, the ex-editor from the New England Journal of Medicine, who has been outwardly speaking, I mean, and also she's not the same one, but also the editors of the British Medical Journal, also the editors even of JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, Lancet. I mean, all of these editors, ex-editors are coming out saying, if you read something in our publications, it's pay to play. Those people, the studies that we're publishing are cherry picked by the companies that want to prove X, Y, and Z through the literature. So it's real science, and they're paying us to be in our journals. So when people say things like trust the science, what are we trusting? We're trusting somebody that has a $200 billion pocketbook. Is ultimately what we're trusting. So I mean, there's that piece of it too. And Marcia Angel, New England Journal of Medicine again, has been quoted as saying, if you walk into a conventional medical office, white coat, traditional treatment, you're already getting ambushed by big pharma. Like it's a ploy. So when people think they're going to go and, I got to find a specialist. No, again, if they're in the system, you're being ambushed. I mean, these are the journals of these are the editors of the science journals that we're supposed to be trusting, saying, don't trust it. Don't trust it. And they're leaving their positions because of their ethics and morals and integrity. So again, there's something there. James Chester, go ahead.
Well, we're talking about policy that doesn't work when it comes to an insurance model, scare care, and it's crisis care, and it's not wellness modeled. It's not health. It's anything from healthcare. It's pay to play, but only if you're about to die. And we're talking about affordability models. We're talking about, whip the card out and pay for it, not your insurance card, but your actual debit card or your check card or your credit card. And that's a world that most people are going to have to get familiar with and more comfortable with as we go along in this next 5 to 7 years, because I do believe that we're going to have to become more accountable for our decision making when it comes to things that we put into our that we have in our diets and the things that we allow ourselves to be influenced by, whether it's a regulatory board that okays it and we just walk along and say yes. We're going to have to be more investigative as to how we feed our families, how we stay healthy. And if your health is your greatest wealth, then you're going to have to find ways to actually make that a priority rather than a secondary. The white coats are going to come and save your life, because that's a fallacy that we've been led to believe, and we haven't gotten healthier. You could see our credit score when it comes to like health scores globally, and we are going down, down, down. So you might want to go back to England, James, but I don't think they're doing any better. So we're running next.
I'm certainly not rushing back to the UK for the standard.
But the NHS, that free socialized care, is not going to save you.
So I know we're getting our quips in, but when it comes down to it, people are going to have to get more critical on their decision making and their question asking when it comes to them and their family unit for long-term health plan and how to do that the best way. And like you said, we don't want to pop and pray, and we don't want to guess and not test. So we definitely have to figure out how to test better to where we get better predictable plan to make sure that the family unit is healthier and nobody's a liability. And we're not just going to say, oh, they're just, they just don't exercise. That's a cop out. Or they're just, a little pudgy or a little overweight, or they just sit on their screen all day long. We're going to have to get over that excuse button, and we're going to have to go to real accountability from the time a kid's born to the time they become a mid 40s to mid 50s to mid 60s to mid 70s. And it's going to have to be a lifelong commitment for people to have to understand that nobody's coming to save you. And I'm going to talk about that in the outro of today's show. But I do believe that the things that we're talking about today are very clear, that if you want to understand how to have a better quality of life and a better health quotient, a better health score, you're going to have to go down and get to baseline levels. Back to the old saying, first you crawl, then you walk, then you run. And if you ever want to start running again with your life, you have to learn how to do the basics and the fundamentals. And I know that sounds like a scary thing that you have to be accountable, but that's really what this game is long term. And that's why this show is so important for people, because we're pulling up big topics that people are just like kind of, going along, they're on the line walking, and the people in front of them aren't walking to the right places. So if you're going to have to figure this out on your own, you might have to go and start your own line and teach people how to walk behind you and make good decisions for not only yourself, but for the people that you're going to be leading. And that's your friends, and that's your family, and that's your community, and that's your city, and that's your state, and that's your country. Because eventually we're going to have accountability, because this whole thing's going to implode, and more people are going to be needing real solutions for real problems that are already knocking on your front and back door and your windows, just like a bad storm that's on the horizon. So back to you, Dr. Jason.
So much there. And I know we're actually getting, short on time here. I think we have like 10 minutes left. And I could chat with both of you guys for another like 5 hours, So when James and I were launching the show initially, we didn't have a timeline on it. And we were like, it'll be open-ended. It'll be like Joe Rogan. We'll go for 1 hour. We'll go for 5 hours, see what happens. But that's hard with guests, because you guys are such important and busy geniuses that we had to decide on 90 minutes. But I just want to say that from a practitioner point of view, a provider point of view, someone trying to help people, live better and get better faster. I have a really simple mantra that I follow when I'm thinking through a case. It's not hard. We like to keep things really simple, right? What's in the system? What's in the body that I want to get out, right? Could be a food sensitivity. It could be inflammation. It could be lipopolysaccharides. It could be a number of things, right? I'm plugging there for some tests that James does with KBMO, right? But we can test that stuff. What do I get out of the system, right? Also, what's missing? Like, what is missing? Most of the time, what I'm talking about is going to be nutrients. Nutrients, I mean, the body runs on 6 things. It's proteins, fats, complex starches, vitamins, minerals, and water, and that's it. Everything else that we add in is not something the body, quote, needs. It would be helpful for a certain period of time, but if we give the body those right, basic elements, the body will get better over time. There are things that we can use, like phytochemicals, plant chemicals, botanicals, certainly bioidentical hormones, glandular medications, sometimes in a very rare sense, prescription medications, which, I'll let people decide their own. But there's time and a place for everything, but ultimately, get the bad stuff out, put the good stuff in, and then help someone with their environment, with the inputs that they're using, whether it be from hydration. This is my book, Blessed Again, 2023 international bestseller, the Epic 5 plan. I will do a shameless plug here, but if you do have Kindle Unlimited, it's completely free. Just log into Amazon, the Epic 5 plan book, by yours truly. It's completely free, Kindle Unlimited. Otherwise, it's a few bucks. You can download an ebook. You can get a paperback. If somebody really wants, they can contact me and I'll do a signed book. But there's going to be an extra fee for that. I'm just teasing. I'm teasing. But when I outline the hydration, the Epic 5 plan is hydration, diet, movement, nervous system regulation, and sleep patterns. And that's it. If I had to write it again, I'd have a 6th one, which is community. Surrounding yourself with a healing community that wants to be better, like James Chester was saying, that are willing to step outside that line and create a new path. Surround yourself with people like that, and you'll realize you're not alone. Because you're not alone. You just need the right community, right? So again, I just want to say, first and foremost, get the bad stuff out, put the good stuff in, and testing, like from KBMO, it helps us practitioners, us providers trying to help other people identify what the heck to get out of the body. I mean, it literally does. It literally tells us, remove these things. People will get better. It's not rocket science, but it's still science, and it's still objective, reproducible, intra-examiner reliability, inter-examiner reliability. I mean, we have all of that built into the KBMO testing, and that's what's important. And you guys have been around forever. It's not a fly-by-night company. It's like 20 years or something. I mean, I don't know how long it's been, but it's a long time. And so I really appreciate that.
I mean, it's like you, Dr. Jason. I mean, 26 years. It's like you have, it takes, it's as I always joke to people, we're an overnight success in 15 years. I mean, it's like that's basically what it takes. You've got to be persistent, do a lot of these meetings, and listen to what the great providers are saying. What are the tests that you guys think we need? How can we improve it? And so that's why we started with only foods. Then we moved to colorings and additives. And then we went, look, you can't run this test unless you're looking at leaky gut at the same time. I mean, so it's coming up with what the great providers like yourself say, and then actioning that rather than going, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Okay, cool. I've got something else over here to spin. Let me kind of hand that over to them. So it's trying to take advantage of the amazing information that we get from spending time with other great professionals like yourself.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, I think those of us that have been around for a long time, yourself, me, I mean, there's other people, Christy Hughes, we mentioned a few, Sachin Patel, we mentioned a number of them, had some of them on the show here. We see patterns in a different way, don't we? We've been doing it long enough to know, like, to kind of sift through the noise. There's a lot of static and noise sometimes with a lot. I always, just as a provider, I don't find it humorous. I don't know how to say it. I'm trying to be nice. When I meet someone and they're like, what do you do? And somehow it comes up functional medicine, and I have qualms with that term right now. But at any rate, that comes up and like, oh, my provider is starting to get into that, and they're kind of doing it and whatever. And I'm like, you need to go to someone else. I don't say that, but I mean, when I hear that, that's like code for me, like they don't know what they're doing. You need to go to someone that has 10, 15, 20 years of experience, because it's just a different perspective. It's not just the 10,000 hours, it's like 50,000 hours, of experience that people have. And there's just a massive difference between someone sort of dabbling in it, whether it's, these fly by night lab companies that are just, started and launched to, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of, in a good way, I think this is good. And to speaking to these providers that are just getting into it, they're frustrated too. They're handcuffed to the system. They want out of the system, and they're looking for solutions, and everyone's got to start somewhere. I would just say, work with that provider. I mean, at least they're open to the discussion, but also work with someone that has, decades of experience. Work with both of them. Have your provider work with the other provider and learn, from those mentors. There are sage people that are in the fields that James White and I are talking about. I mean, there are really good people that have been there, done that, sifted through the noise, knows what works, knows what doesn't work. What's the best testing? What's the best supplement company? What's the right drugs that we can use in the right way for a limited amount of time? There's all that. I know we have 5 minutes, guys. I have a rapid fire question for James White. And we're going to get into this next time. I'm going to set the stage.
Okay.
We talked about food sensitivity testing, the FIT test, and inflammation. What foods are causing an immunological response with inflammation. That led us to things like leaky gut, which we didn't also talk about. So there's that. Looking at things like zonulin and occludin, and words that we're going to save for next time. I'm going to dangle the carrot, and lipopolysaccharides, LPSs, inflammatory chemicals, right? I mean, we're going to talk about these things, but then that led to the cardiovascular inflammation test, which I call the CIT test. I don't know if that's what you guys call it, but the CIT. That said,
we sit too much, need the sit. No, that's probably not a good marketing.
I know. But we talked about the gold standard, unfortunately, is the cholesterol test. Do you have high cholesterol? Which a lot of people do. So everybody needs a statin drug, right? Which also can lead to muscle breakdown, including cardiac muscle, rhabdomyolysis, increased heart attacks by about 2% of the population that take those statin drugs. I'm not telling our listeners what to do. I'm just saying you got to be informed. If somebody prescribes you a drug, you got to know what the heck the side effects and what the risks are. There is no side effect from removing inflammatory foods from your diet. There's no side effect from eating real whole foods except feeling better. Talk about safety. I mean, it's insane. Anyway, tell us quickly what the cardiovascular inflammation test is looking at compared to the standard lipid profile, the cholesterol profile.
So in essence, what we've done is if you look at the standard lipid profile, there's a few things that they call measured markers on there. So we've made sure measured is actually, they're making it up rather than saying, did we really, did we actually measure that? So we've gone in and said, look, let's measure all of the markers rather than kind of come up with some kind of hocus pocus. The other thing we've done, as I said, we added two really key things. ApoB is the number one risk factor for cholesterol in the US. 5% of the population would test for it. My favorite marker, and again, I'll finish on a high note here, is LP(a). Everyone needs to be tested for LP(a). It is the only genetic marker that I would hold a candle to on the basis it's the only one that exists for 30% of the population. So if you have elevated LP(a), it means the plaquing in your system is exacerbated and accelerated. So you want to know that from a cardiovascular risk profile. And unfortunately, less than 1% of the population have been tested for it here in the US. So get tested for LP(a) if you do nothing else, because again, you need to go to a provider who says, I'm going to look at what's going on. And the final thing on LP(a) is I was talking to an ER physician who unfortunately, Dr. Jason, I've got to get into functional medicine. And so I said, well, how was last night? He said, I had 2 patients. He said, one of them made it. One of them, unfortunately didn't. The one that did, we put a stent in, and then they made me put him on statins. I know he's going to be back in 3 months' time because we didn't test him for Lp(a). So the likelihood is we keep putting stents in all these patients. They put them on statins, and because statins raise your Lp(a), we see them in 3 months' time. So again, it's back to this standard of care of it gets even worse. So it's not only bad in terms of upfront. Then when they come in and try and treat them, they then actually exasperate it by not doing some basic testing at that point. And that's from a guy who runs, an operating, works in the ER and, is seeing patients on a daily basis. So again, the knowledge is there. I just love to think that some of that knowledge is being listened to, and we can actually translate it into kind of, good standard of care for every patient rather than, as you quite rightly coined, standard of care.
Yeah, it's so true.
So some easy fixes. And so
Yeah.
I think that's the great news for patients. It's like, if you're being told you've got cardiovascular issues, you can get some of these very basic tests. And from there, there can be some really simple solutions. So, in terms of the Lp(a) berberine, I mean, there's nothing simpler than that. So there's some simple things that patients can do. Obviously, that's not advice from me. That you've got to go and see your providers and work with that. But what I love about what we do is we're highlighting some really key things within an area like cardiovascular, which patients can do, which avoids them getting to that point of having a stent put in and other things like that.
Totally true. And lipoprotein A, Lp(a), Lp(a), it's all the same thing. Absolutely a very important marker, and as well as some of the other markers. We'll dive more into that at our next episode that we have you on. I do want to just talk about just very quickly, and then James Chester, I'll pass it over to you for some closing remarks and whatnot. But I think the question that I would be asking right now is, why don't they test those things, right? And that question is answered. I mean, first of all, we're looking for rapid turnaround, something called relative value units, RVUs, pumping up, how quickly can we keep the revenue up and see as many people as possible? And as James White was mentioning, if we give you a statin drug and it pumps up Lp(a), putting you at risk for another cardiac, episode, so to speak, it's a customer. Right. I mean, it keeps the system moving forward.
And cycle. I'm not sure a good cycle, but it's certainly a cycle.
It's certainly a cycle. And I think if our listeners can find the documentary from a number of years ago called Escape Fire, I think the whole title is Escape Fire, The Fight to Rescue American Healthcare. They're actually looking at the VA and some VA delivery of care. I actually wrote my master's degree on something called Soldiers in the Middle, people coming back from the Middle East to the Midwest and the lack of VA resources here. So this documentary hit home with me, but they actually interviewed a cardiologist in here and they said, why don't you do this testing? Why don't you teach people how to eat for their heart? Why aren't you doing that? And she was like, listen, I'm going to be clear with you guys. I can spend 20 hours trying to tell somebody all this stuff and test all this stuff and dig in and this and that. And I might in the end get paid $150 or $200, or I can walk in and in 5 minutes, have my team prep a stent surgery, and I can get paid $1,500, $2,500 in 5 minutes. And I can do those 5-minute procedures. I can do 3, 4, 5 of those an hour and just walk in and pop in and do those. And she goes, I make like 10 grand an hour doing that, or $100 an hour, and it's just a different way of thinking. And she wasn't proud of it. She was just being honest. So when people ask, why didn't my other doctor do this for me? They're not getting paid to do it. They're not trained to do it. But even if they were, they're not getting paid to do it. And most doctors are not going to do that, so especially if they're within the system, especially if they're employed by a hospital system or an insurance company or a clinic that just wants quick, cheap turnaround as fast as you can, So at any rate, that's my soliloquy on that. I have so much more to talk. James White, I'm just gonna say thank you so much for being on the show today. I mean, all that we did was just open up more and more cans of worms. I like talking with veterans in the field that have been there, in the trenches with me. You're one of them. KBMO has been around forever. For our listeners again that want to check out KBMO, go to getbetterfasterpodcast.com, go to the episode page, and just check it all out. We're going to have some great stuff there for you. And James, thank you again for being on the show today. James Chester, I'll pass it right over to you for some closing remarks.
Well, after having this opportunity to be on the show with both of you, I feel like we did a great job of covering many topics that the consumer and the practitioner are all secretly thinking, and they don't know how to ask or have the resources for those questions. So appreciate the opportunity to take some dives on some questions that I believe that a lot of people are interested in. They just don't know how to frame them or have access. So really, really cool and great work today on those. Personally speaking, James, I need to get these testings. I need to get on board, and let's not guess anymore. Let's start testing. And I want to jump into what you got going on over there with the KBMO system in the diagnostics. And I know Jason did a great job of leading people over to our website to do that with us. So great job over there, Jason. But today's been absolutely eye-opening. I know not just for me, just because I get a chance to be in the driver's seat, which I really appreciate this opportunity to drive down this conversation on the Get Better Faster podcast with both of you. But for our listeners, if you've been struggling with mystery symptoms, gut issues, autoimmune conditions, things we didn't even really talk about today, brain fog, weight loss resistance, or feel like something is off and nobody can help figure this out, this is it. This is for you. And as Dr. Jason in his closing there was talking, the real reason why physicians do what they do is because there's no money in healthy people. And accountability is the big word for you guys this year. If you want to not have to worry about the white coats coming to save you, the fit test from KBMO Diagnostics measures inflammation, not just exposure and not your allergies. That is a massive difference, and that is why this test stands alone in the marketplace. Head over to the getbetterfasterpodcast.com and follow the link to connect with James at KBMO to get started. Stop guessing, and like we said multiple times, start testing. Remember, nobody is coming to save you. I alluded to that earlier, but solutions like this can prove you can save yourself. James, thank you again for joining us and for the incredible work you are doing with your team globally. And to you all, our Get Better Faster Nation, thank you for listening and thank you for continued support. You know, I always say this, guys. You know, the best way to support the show is share this episode with somebody who needs to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode and get all the behind the scenes action we've got coming your way. We've got plenty more coming your way. And we get this asked all the time. How do you work with Dr. Jason and his incredible functional medicine team at Radiant Life and Radiant Health and the Thyroid Authority? Check the link. Just click over to the getbetterfasterpodcast.com webpage, and we will get you connected. We got more incredible guests lined up who are going to blow your mind with real solutions, just like James today, for reclaiming your health, your happiness, and your life. Until next time, keep questioning everything and keep getting better faster. And James, appreciate your time today. I know you have a busy schedule ahead of you, so thanks for being on with us today.
No, my pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, J Squared, for making it JQ. Right. Appreciate it.
That's right. Thank you, James and James. And thank you to our listeners again today. We love you all. Appreciate you all. And as James says, keep getting better faster. Love you guys.
All right, guys. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Ever wish a podcast would explain how to get better faster from the standpoint of longevity, biohacking, and personalized functional medicine? Co-hosts Dr. Jason Bradley and James Chester, along with executive producer Rachel Bradley, bring you the Get Better Faster podcast. Their mission is radically simple: to revolutionize health by connecting people with the experts, technologies, and protocols that mainstream medicine ignores. Because people deserve to get better faster.